What can you do to help a summer food plot during a drought? We're gonna tell you all about it here in this video. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. And even with the drought, like we gotta echo, like not to give up on the spring plot, right? Like the seed's still there and there's still things we can do. Like for instance, I'm gonna go fill in some spots that maybe didn't germinate as well with my broadcast method, right? You know, what are you doing to kind of keep on top of the spring mix, or what could others be doing in a situation like this?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a couple things to make mention of. One being the importance of an exclusion fence. I wanted to make mention of that because it is very, very important, especially when you get a situation relatively high deer density, you get a good rain, things germinate, and then it's very dry. The whole Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, et cetera. We're saying, without, 30 some days without rain is pretty unprecedented, but it's also sets you up for like worst case scenario when you're growing warm season annuals that have grown out of the ground because you got some rain in a high deer density area. And unless you're planting like ag size fields, you're probably going to have some heavy browse pressure. I continue to tell people that it's very, very important to put an exclusion fence up. I've talked to some people, I didn't cut a deer track or something like that. And you're probably not going to, especially when it's dry, right? One, the deer tracks aren't going to be really visible, and cameras only tell a small portion of a story. Some of the cell cams, they miss pictures, the deer might avoid them, whatever it might be. So really, guys, that exclusion fence will guarantee you what's happening in your field. So that's one thing that I do, so I can really understand what are the deer removing versus what was drought suppressed. Yep. The other thing that I did is we went back in about 3 weeks after planting and we just had run out of time first go around. I wish I could say this was all intentional, but we did have a couple areas that we had not planted, a couple fields. So we went in and planted those and then actually got some of this more recent rain. So those are going to not get as fully developed as some of the other stuff that I got in earlier. But the nice thing about it is I'm still going to be able to add more food. So it's going to reduce some of the pressure on some of my other fields. So I was able to get that in, which helps. So that's one of the things that I do as far as the tilling, or the no tilling. On another farm that I planted, I did the YouTube videos on the conservation, tillage, and mowing, right? So that is a really kind of a rough field. It's only been a quote unquote field for us. This is only the second year. So we cleared it with a bush hog last year, sprayed it because it was all just like autumn olive and things like that. And it's surrounded by bedding on like basically all sides. It's really a unique situation. We went in there and we didn't want to use herbicide again because we had used it in the fall, and we're only going to get a few months of growth out of this nitro boost anyways. And the field was like 80% weed free from the carbon load. So I did a really light, and you can see the YouTube video on this, but I'm talking like less than a ½ inch of tillage. Like the soil looked like it was mowed. So we seeded in front of the tractor, and then we did a really light till and mow at the same time to cover the seeds. So then what we did is we waited. That seed unfortunately sat for 10 or 12 days without getting the rain we were supposed to get. So that was a little bit of a bummer. We definitely had some predation on that. We went back after we did get one good rain event. We went back and we had really nice germination. So that was 3 acres. I put down about 3.5 acres of seed initially. So I increased my seeding rate by about a ½ acre. And then we went back and we put down about another, I think it wasn't quite measured because it was actually honestly a couple bags that had broken and stuff, but it was probably between a ½ acre to an acre of seed, I'd say, give or take, that we just top dressed into the thin spots. So anywhere where some predation had happened or over browse. And of course, then we got rain the next like 2 days. So that's a good method for keeping moisture. One, mitigating the risk of drought. What can we do? Follow no-till practices or reduce till, try to keep a thatch, trying to keep living roots going, have good root structure, good diversity, good soil fertility. Those are all things that are going to help to have healthier plants, healthier roots. They're going to be able to withstand a drought, right? Good soil biology, having that thatch layer, and then of course, just praying for the rain. Yeah. So those are some of the things that we had done. I will say though, we have an exclusion fence on that field. The first night we so this was after planting, right? My buddy and he goes, hey, I'm going to throw a Tacticam up. So he puts his camera up. We weren't out of there for 2 hours. And that evening, now there was beans and peas and buckwheat in there. Again, I did a video to show it. That evening, there was like 7 or 8 deer out on that field eating that fresh growth, right? So you do need that rain to keep up with that. And then that secondary seeding is going to help to kind of fill in some of those gaps. So even then, the exclusion fence hadn't had enough time to really show the difference, but clearly the camera was helpful there in showing, oh boy, the deer pressure on this particular field is pretty substantial already, which we expected it to be. Just some of the reason why we went with a little bit higher seeding rate for that field.
You know, I use the exclusion fence even this spring, watching the carbon load come back from last fall. You could easily tell the deer were hammering that down.